Welcome to the Following the Joy podcast with me, Debbie Westwell, confidence and mindset coach and massive travel enthusiast. This podcast is a place to talk about being the best version of yourself, following your heart, making scary changes and having fun on this adventure that we call life. I'm your biggest cheerleader and I want you to know that it is never too late to start over and make a life you are excited to get out of bed for. So let's go and get following the joy. In this week's episode, I am talking to Yolanda Brooks, who is a somatic therapist, a circle facilitator, an NLP life coach, and a wild writing teacher. So Yolanda is the owner of Letting the Light In. She's on social media, and obviously all the links will be in the show notes. She shares with us a story of her life and how she's managed to find her way into the somatic therapy work and the wild writing work. We talk about her anxiety and depression in the past. We touch on the power of words and how we process them. And she talks and explains about the subconscious writing process and almost like being your own therapist. And actually, after the interview, she said to me, she wished she'd have told you all that she didn't want to find yet another therapist. When she found the writing, it helped her to almost therapize herself. And then we laughed because we didn't know whether therapize yourself was actually a word, but we're having it. So it's a Yolanda and a Debbieism now. As always, I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Yolanda. Welcome to Following the Joy podcast. I'm so excited to have you on board and talking to me today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Okay, so we'll kick straight off. So what I normally do is I'll get you to introduce yourself to our listeners and then we'll just have a conversation from there. So go and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm a somatic therapist with a special interest in how our stories, the stories we have from childhood, trapped inside, how they affect us in terms of our identity, the way we communicate with others, and how our relationships function.
Wow. So what does the somatic therapy involve? Because I've done some somatic breath work, which was quite deep and intensive. And I ended up either laughing or crying as emotions were passing through the body. But so for anybody who's not come across like the somatic kind of ways of doing anything, how do you help people deal with those kind of emotions from childhood and stuff?
Well, I mean, the breath work is a great example of it because it's the breath work you do does release those trapped emotions without you actually having to think about anything. I've done the breath work myself and ended up crying, giggling. And it's quite amazing, isn't it? It's quite an amazing experience. I've actually done some breath work recently where I ended up having the most amazing visions.
Oh, wow.
It's absolutely amazing. I could talk about that for quite a while. But somatics is basically, soma is your body and somatics is about the body. And there's much more known now that all your traumas, all your things that you've carried around get trapped in the body when they're not released at the time. So trauma isn't about huge life-changing events. It's how you've reacted to either the huge life-changing events, which a lot of psychologists call the big T trauma, or the compound effect of all the little things throughout your life from pre-birth, actually, is what I studied, pre-birth, birth, and childhood. And how they all compound on each other because they're not dealt with, they're not released, and they just sit deep. So what I'm really interested in is, some people aren't actually aware of their own feeling. If I say to somebody, for example, so when you feel angry, is it in your head? Is it in your throat? Is it in your chest? And they can't tell me. So that tells me that they're so dissociated from that emotion connected to an event that they no longer recognize what's happening to them.
Yeah. It's like that whole keep calm and carry on, that very British slogan that we've got is actually really bad. like also, like other things that I've heard growing up, like, put your big girl knickers on, just deal with it, suck it up.
Yeah.
Like those kind of things that you're
Yes.
being told is exactly what you're saying then, isn't it? Then we're repressing the emotions. And I think there is a huge disconnect. I've had it personally, like I'm in my head a lot, and my head is a huge disconnect from my body, when in actual fact it's like you should be going off your gut reaction. You should be going off what your body is telling you, because your brain is a very good storyteller and fills in gaps when it doesn't know the answer to things and things like that. So, but your body knows what's going on. And this is definitely something I've been looking into, especially over the past year, like all of this, how you hold trauma, how it kind of stores in your body, if it's like, how it can then turn into it. Well, it's unease, so dis-ease basically in your body. And I'm just on a personal mission I want to kind of slide sideways into my grave at a very old age, having my full marbles, being really intelligent and just having energy and fun. And my mum has got dementia. And so I guess that's kind of driven me forwards into finding like that's not a pathway for me. So let's choose a different pathway. And if it involves releasing traumas or emotions, and like you said, trauma isn't like I was abused or I was in a major accident or anything like that. Trauma can be anything from I got told no a lot at school, or I came from a poorer family and so I couldn't afford the same things as all my friends could afford, and so maybe there was a few comments there, and then that sits in your body, doesn't it, I guess, as trauma. So how did you get into it?
Well, I know that I've been dealing with a lot of things. I like the word baggage, and I know a lot of people don't, but to me, it's so representative of what you're doing. Is you're carrying all this stuff around. So I've been trying to work myself out most of my life. I've had hypnotherapy, I've had talking therapy, I've read books. All the things. And I knew that I was missing something. I knew that I had all this stuff inside that wanted to come out, and I just couldn't find a way. Hypnotherapy really helped. So there are 3 things that kind of changed my life. The first one was hypnotherapy with the right hypnotherapist, because he was so good. He was so giving of his time and his energy. And because I'd done a lot of reading and grown up around people with mental health issues, I knew a lot. And I've got a joint degree in psychology and physiology. So I knew a lot about the way the mind works and, the way it connects to the body. So I said to him, you need to please just bypass my critical mind, my conscious thought, because I know what you're going to ask me. I know what you're going to say. Or at least I knew what the others had said. And he actually did manage it. And the wonderful thing about hypnotherapy, when you find the right therapist, is that I didn't think it was working. I used to sit in his chair, oh, my back hurts, and what am I going to make Jacob for tonight? And, what time is it? I'm thinking, this is rubbish, it's not working. And then about 6 or 7 weeks into it, I had a trigger, which ordinarily would have triggered me right back into my I'm useless, nobody cares about me sort of victim mentality. And it didn't happen. And my brain was like, oh, okay, I don't feel the guilt that I thought I would. So I just felt free. And every time something that I thought would affect me in that sort of area of my life, and it didn't. So I'm sold on hypnotherapy when you find the right hypnotherapist.
Yeah. I think that's the same anyway. Like when you find the right coach, when you find the right therapist, because you essentially are going to be vulnerable in front of somebody. So you need to talk to people first and check out if you actually like them, if their energies match with you and things like that. Because I'm the same as you. I've had some therapies with some people that I'm just like, oh, and then I've had others where I'm like, oh my God, I love you. You're awesome. And I feel like I can just be myself and just be authentically me, warts and all, and snotty noses and everything. So
yes. Yeah, it's very important to find the right person, because, your energies have to match. We all know that some people feel like home and some people really don't. And just because someone's a therapist doesn't mean they're your home. You have to find, I think it was my 4th. So that changed my life. And then life was better, but I still had issues that I knew I wasn't really dealing with. I wasn't quite sure how to deal with them. And I'd lived with lifelong depression and anxiety.
Mm.
And then the second big change in my life was I was on holiday with my family and my brother, I was feeling quite low. And when you've had lifelong depression and you don't really understand why, when you feel it coming back, it's quite frightening because you're really worried you're going to sink back down and into this hole, and you don't know how long it takes you to get out. So although I was fine, I was having those thoughts and having those feelings of, it's coming back. What do I do? My brother handed me his phone and said, "You were given this book 20 years ago. You've not listened to it. You didn't read it." Because obviously it was just paperback books. And you didn't read it. Listen to it now. It'll take you a few hours. So I listened to this book, and half an hour in, my life changed. My anxiety vanished.
Oh my goodness.
I understood where all my stuff was coming from. And I spent the next year in absolute bliss because I had such peace of mind. It was unbelievable.
What book is it? Share.
Well, do you know what? I think it's about 30 years old. It's called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There you go.
Yeah, it's amazing. And what was interesting to me was I'd had this book on my bookshelf for 20 years and refused to read it. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, so if I've known about this book and I've been told to read it for 20 years and I refused to, so now my brain's going, why did I refuse? What's the blockage? What's the resistance? What am I frightened? And I knew it didn't take long to work out. I knew that my fear was that if I wasn't this person I'd been my entire life, this scared, frightened, very angry person, angry, depressed, felt worthless. If I wasn't that person, who was I?
Yeah.
And actually, it's true that the familiar, no matter how bad, is easier to deal with because it's got a predictable outcome. The unfamiliar, the new, can be so frightening because we just don't know what's going to happen. And our brains try to protect us, don't they, by going, well, we know what happens if you do this.
Yeah.
Do this. Don't do that because you don't know.
Yeah.
So that book changed my entire life and, sort of starting on my next phase of overanalyzing myself.
That's it. That you peel back one layer, you're like, you think you'd done? Oh no, look, there's more.
There's always more. I mean, I love the phrase that there's a quote: we heal in layers or something.
Yeah.
Healing happens in layers, but we are literally human onions.
Yeah, we're a bunch of stinky onions.
Yeah, stinky onions. Yeah, with fairy bits on the top.
I think the more work that you do, though, I think you get faster at identifying, pinpointing, and dealing with the next thing. And it's like almost like you said, that fear of doing something different. And our brains do a very good job of keeping us safe. We touch something hot, we take our hand off because our brain tells us to. Our brain tells us not to cross the road because there's a bus coming. So actually that whole safety mechanism is great, but not when you're trying to bypass the safety mechanism. Yeah. And that's why people stay in abusive relationships or jobs that they don't like or anything, because you are being told internally, this is safe here. We know what the outcome is. Like you said, we don't know what's happening over there. And it's almost finding that way, I guess, to appease that part of your brain and then again, get into your body and go for what feels right, even though it might be scary. It's like me starting this podcast, putting the first one out. I was terrified. Recording the first one, I was terrified. But the more you do it, the more it becomes like, oh, it's normal now. This is like a normal thing to do now. So it's like the first time you probably ever went to primary school or to high school, everybody has that. I don't know what to expect. So therefore, I'm scared. I'm scared and I'm frightened. But we're forced to do it because your parents are like, get to school. That's it. You've got no choice. Government says you've got to go. So you go, and then suddenly, it becomes like 5 days a week you're used to doing it. So I guess it's practice.
It turns out, and that's what becomes part of your identity is all that. They go back to school days. We're taught not to really think outside the box. Don't try and think new. You've got to do this, that, and the other. You're not allowed to do other things. So the thought of doing something new is so alien to so many people because it's not comfortable. And looking, the whole thing about identity, it's not just what we've been given by our parents and our siblings and our friends and our work colleagues. That everything they think of us and tell us we are becomes our identity. But there's just so much more to it. And if we don't know who we are, it's very, very frightening. So yeah, the third thing that changed my life was the writing.
Beautiful.
Because it was really odd. I mean, I was doing my job over COVID, carried on working, really, really full on. My partner's work vanished because he was a pilot, so his work dried up. So I had to do more. So that year for me didn't stop. I worked more, but it was lovely to come home to my partner and my son. It was lovely. So last December, he said, "Well, take the winter off. Don't worry about, take a couple of months off. Find out what it is you really want to do. It's I've had a year off, cruising around the garden in the most beautiful weather the UK's ever seen. Now it's your turn." So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And this is why I love Facebook algorithms. I know it's a pain, but honest to God, I love it.
You might be the only person in the world that's
Well, I tell you why, because for some reason I thought I could do something for me. And as a child, I'd always loved writing poetry. So all of a sudden, this little writing workshop came up. So I did that. And the things I wrote, I mean, it wasn't brilliant at the start because I was literally learning how to hold a pen again. Because I'd been, writing by hand for quite a while. But the emotions that came out, the thoughts that, those thoughts that you think, oh, do I really want to be thinking this out loud because it's not nice? The ones that you sort of stuffed down in your head, they wouldn't stay stuffed. They came out onto paper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And what the algorithm then did was bought me another one, and it bought me another one. I'm like, okay, universe, I'm doing these. I'm doing all of these. And they're all quite different. But I realized that I was sitting there writing without thinking, and I was crying. And the things that came out from basically the stories that came out from childhood that I'd been waiting just came out onto the page. And I ended up writing poetry, which, some of it obviously rubbish, but some of it was like, now, there are things I write. And I thought, what am I writing here? Because I'm not thinking, I'm not conscious.
Yeah.
I'm writing, and I'll close the book and I'll get some lunch and I'll come back and think, I'm going to read that scroll that I wrote. I ended up crying because of what I'd written. Is like, oh my God, seriously?
Wow.
So then
So could you remember the incidents that you were writing about, or were some of them like you'd hidden them away and you couldn't really remember them when they were coming out?
Do you know, there's a lot of things that I now know were my little compounding things, my little stones. I like to use the analogy of stones, right? So when you've had big T trauma, it's like carrying this huge rock in a bag of fish powder. When you've had lots all through your life, you basically got your bag and you're just putting more and more pebbles in. Just because they're small pebbles doesn't make them weigh any less when the bag is full.
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I made it up. I love it.
Own it. Have it. Yolanda says. Yolanda's stone analogy. Let's all use it.
So yeah, I'd realised, so many things, memories, thoughts, feelings, and thoughts and feelings weren't necessarily attached to an event, but obviously quite a few were. And there were a few in particular that took quite a lot of processing. They'd hang around for a bit and they'd get worse before they got better. But I was at the point where I knew that it was worth it. And that's the thing about the fear of facing your shadows, your demons, the unspoken, is that as you said earlier, the more you face, the easier it is. And actually, I sat there and thought, okay, this is bringing up something. This is going to be hard, but I want to do this. I want to get it done, out of the way, out of my body, out of my mind. And I won't say I'm 100% cured, because nobody ever is. There's, you know, some things will never really leave you completely, but it's the difference between them being a memory and you constantly reliving it. And that's the difference.
It's that emotional involvement, isn't it? It's like, I think once
Yeah.
you've processed something, but if you're not processing it, you'll end up crying, or it'll trigger you, you'll get angry, or
Right.
you'll get frustrated, or something some form of emotion will be happening. Whereas I think once you've processed it, it's still part of you. It's part of your history. It's how you've got to who you are now. But you can talk about it openly. It's almost like it's almost like you're reading from a book, as opposed to you're actually feeling it, type of thing, isn't it? So
it's no longer your identity. It's something that you experienced.
Yeah.
And that to me is quite important, because, you know, if you say, oh, I'm an angry person. I mean, I used to say that because that's what I believed about myself. I was angry. I was carrying so much anger from all this unprocessed baggage. I am an angry person. But actually, I was feeling anger. I was experiencing anger. And it was when I realized that I could separate them, it was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel these things doesn't mean they make me who I am now. They make me who I have been, but I don't need to keep them. I don't need to hold on to these things. I can empty my pockets and put them back on the ground. And they're there, but they're not me. They're separate little entities that occurred. And I don't know if you can sort of, you know, I don't know how you can force yourself to do it. It just in my brain, it happened. And it happened for me through the words. And the thing about the writing the poetry and the sort of little stories, it really helped me see how my identity had affected the way I communicated with people, because I was the angry, the depressed, the anxious. So affected my communication with people, the misunderstandings, because I've got my baggage dealing with this person. They've got their baggage dealing with me, and their baggage is dealing with my baggage. So it's not even just a two-way street. It's, you know, it's a bit of a dodgy situation.
Your Louis Vuitton suitcases don't match with their like little hold all. Do you know what I mean? And then everybody's carrying their own stuff.
Big bag, little bag, and they all get messed up in this communication. Yeah. Horribly wrong. That was an amazing revelation, because it meant that when my partner and I got back together, and I say back, we were together as teenagers, and then life separated us, and then we came back together about 9 years ago. I had a lot of baggage, and he had a lot of baggage, and we were constantly reacting to each other, but not to each other, to each other's history, to each other's reaction, to each other's trauma, basically. And it took a good couple of years for us to learn to. It's such an American phrase, but actually it's a beautiful phrase. It took us a good 2 or 3 years to really, really learn to hold space for each other and say, I understand you feel this way. Are you angry at me, or are you reacting to something else? Or because you're defensive, or you're upset? Is that at me, or is that at a feeling that is coming up from a memory? So we did a lot of work there. And that obviously then got me interested in relationships, because, you know, and relationships with anybody, your kids, your parents, you know, particularly somebody who's been significant in your life and caused your trauma, you know. So yeah, that's kind of where I got to. So
I think that's wonderful. I think, sorry to interrupt you there. Like, I just think, first of all, I think it's wonderful that you were together and then you separated, then you've come back together. That's amazing. But also to have that kind of self-awareness that of on both parties, because how many relationships would have split up before the 2 years, of processing it, or how many relationships wouldn't even be able to communicate with each other, that they wouldn't get to the point where they can say, is it, if had somebody else said this same thing, would it still trigger you, or is it something about me personally? And to also learn to not take it personally, and almost like take responsibility for your own baggage, instead of playing that victim, like, you have caused me to do this. So in actual fact, no, I think something in my past has caused me to react to how you have said this to me, is a huge shift that I think so many people would aspire to be able to do if they're not already doing it. So I think that a good piece of advice there would definitely be, like, or how do you have that conversation with a partner and say, we need to have like a grown-up conversation without emotions getting involved? Like, how do you even say that to your partner? Because some people just wouldn't be able to do it, would they? So
yeah, I mean, you are massively self-aware, to be fair, but because I'd already started on this little stage of my journey, and actually going back to the power of now, it was, you've heard advice, words, something a million times, but you hear somebody say it in a different way. And it was the way he said it. And that was when my ears first picked up about the meaning of how important words are. I mean, I did know, but it was like a reinforcement of these were the words that got through to me for whatever reason. And when you're arguing with somebody or disagreeing or not understanding somebody, you're listening to the words, and maybe you're saying the wrong words, and they're interpreting it in a different way to the way you mean it. And this is where the problem happens, is because we have different stories about the same word. I can't tell you how much I'm obsessed with, so passionate about the words people use. I listen to every word, and I'm fully aware that most people aren't conscious of the words and the effects of their words on people who are sensitive to words. So I take everything, with holding space, pinch of food and salt. But I listen to every word, but I listen to the words that aren't said. And with my private clients, they've said several times, how do you know this about me when I haven't told you? How are you telling me something that I feel when I didn't actually realize I felt that way?
or couldn't articulate it.
Or know how to articulate or feel it, and feel it. And I think part of growing up as a traumatized child makes you very super sensitive to what people say, do, how they move, everything. You watch everything. So I think as an intuitive coach, I'm able to spot what they're not saying as well as what they are saying. And that's where I dive in, and that's where the magic happens. So in terms of the words, it's the same sort of thing. I know what words you're saying. I know what word you're not saying. What do you understand by this word? How does it relate to how I understand that word? And the writing, I think the writing, when it's done subconsciously, releases so much more. So years ago, for like 20 years, we've been told, journal, get your feelings out, journal. And when I was in sort of the worst depression, the worst parts of my life, why don't you just journal, write it down, you'll feel better. And I don't know what to write, because I didn't know, I couldn't untangle the thoughts in my head in order to write a coherent sentence, for one. And for two, it was so bad in here. The thought of actually having it out in the world on paper was horrific. I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So doing it subconsciously, so I can explain the process in a bit, but doing it subconsciously meant that I didn't have to think. I don't know how it happened. It's your body does it, your subconscious does it, the energy and the magic of the universe does it. And for me, it was like voices and words came from behind the right side of my head.
Oh, wow.
Straight through my arm. And I would be, right, and without stopping. And like 2, 3, 100 words, 400 words, and not want to stop.
Wow. I mean, I've heard friends who have written books. I've heard of people writing books this way. Like, they were just like, it wasn't me. It just basically flowed through me. And I'll be honest, I've always struggled because I'm the same as you, people like journal. I've never been able to complete a journal, a travel journal, a diary or anything. I kind of get stuck, and I know that I'm in my head a lot. So I know that I'm like over analyzing everything I'm doing. And I've started writing a lot of gratitude journals, and I do kind of journal somehow I'm feelings, but I don't really understand that whole, how do you get to the point where it's subconsciously doing it? Because I would love to. And then I'm 100% going to come to one of your writing things that we'll talk about, we'll tell everybody about in a minute. But like, how do you get to the point of conscious writing?
Well, you learn to access it very quickly once you know how. It's one of those things that's very simple, but it's hard to do. And it is through meditation, whether that be guided, listening to somebody else, or whether that be silent, whether that be walking. It's finding the way that you are able to switch your mind on. So in my workshops, we do a little bit of conscious journaling. And I ask people to write how they feel, why they're here, the usual. And then I give them a little gift. Well, and we do two little things. And after each one of those things, I say, does this affect the way you feel about what you just wrote? Does it change how you feel now? A bit more journaling. And then actually it's a guided meditation, but it's not just, there's a grounding. The grounding is getting your body to relax and forgetting. Because although we need to live inside our body to feel, in order to access the subconscious, you need your body to be completely relaxed and not really be aware of it in any great way. So once they're relaxed, the body's relaxed, I then take them on a little journey. And, some of them could be very general. But say in a class we're doing past relationships, the meditation will be specific. I'll take them on a specific journey in order to access this information. Inner child. I love inner child work. I love past work because that's what our identity is. So, I use that, and they're fully aware that when I stop the guided meditation and they come back, I guess you would call it a prompt, but it's not a prompt because it's not a simple question. It's either something incredibly deep or half a sentence, and then they go. And one of the most magical things in the workshops is it always makes me laugh. We do it in 3 sections because I know a short session, then a bit longer, and then a long ride. And by the time we're on the 3rd ride, I always like to say, okay, how long do you think you were writing for? And most people think 3 or 4 minutes. And I've said, I've been sat here watching you write for 25 minutes.
Wow.
And they're completely oblivious to how much time has passed. And they're saying, but I just want to keep going. I want to keep going. And in my workshops, nobody has to share, but we do sort of sit, we circle after and talk about how it felt to have those things come out without conscious input, conscious blockages. And some people do share, and it's we're all in tears because it's so deep. It's quite amazing. And it actually relates to the sister circles because that starts with the grounding and meditation, and then the floor is open for women who just want to get the words out. So one of my agreements is that there is no discussion, no suggestion, recommendation. It's literally, you hear somebody's story of how they are today, this week, this year, and you can acknowledge, in any way physically, and then we go back into silence. And it's being able to hear a story and contain your urge to help. Because as women, we have this urge to help. Make me think, we do. But actually, the ethos is that we all have what we need inside us. We just need to be able to access it and find it in a safe space. So then other people that are able to share, I relate to you. This is my story. So everything has to be about yourself, but in a very sort of simple, pure sharing way. And it's amazing because a thread always happens. There's always a thread in the stories because they connect.
Yeah.
And the people who have come to the circles have said, we're all so different. We all live different lives, different ages, different careers. Yet we all have this same experience that is connected by being a woman, being feminine, or being a human being. We all have this thread.
Yeah.
So, they're just wonderful experiences. And it's the whole thing about words, being able to say what you want, just get the words out without having somebody telling you how to fix it or interrupt you.
Yeah.
Also, being able to sit with yourself, which is what you do in the writing. You're sitting with yourself and you're letting the deepest parts of you come out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I've done one of those sister circles and it was quite strange at first too, because I am definitely, if you come to me, I'm going to try and solve your problem. My brain goes into solutionizing mode, and it's definitely something that I've had to learn to stop and be like, can I make a suggestion? Or like, would you like some input or not?
Yeah.
And we did it. We had to kind of put our hands up and like jazz hands, shake them around. And that's basically how we acknowledge somebody. And it felt so bizarre not to say anything after somebody had spoken. And you just want to give them a big hug or whatever, but just to kind of like do jazz hands. But obviously, I guess you could do like prayer position or put your hands on your heart. You could even do the universal thank you for sign language, couldn't you? From your hands to your chin. But yeah, so obviously for anybody listening, Yolanda does sister circles and holds those spaces for people. I think they're online, aren't they, Yolanda?
Yes, they're on.
And you do your wild writing workshops. Are they online or are they in person?
Both. I mean, online.
Excellent.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, where I live, it's a coastal village, but obviously between Southampton and Bournemouth, so people come. So yeah, in person, but online as well, because it's so nice to be able to reach people. But also, if somebody has their own space in their home to write where they feel safe, or they're too far away, it's just wonderful that the same thing can happen.
Yeah. And you can create your own comfort, I guess, especially if you're dealing with untapped emotions. I mean, I am really interested in doing one of these writing workshops because I'm like you, I know about the power of words. I bang on about it all the time. I tell it to everybody who will listen and to all of my clients as well. Like you do not say, I am an emotion. You say, I am feeling an emotion. Like I am Debbie. I am a woman. I live in Bournemouth. They are all facts, but it's, it's like, I am angry. My brain doesn't disassociate between I am Debbie and I am angry. It goes, oh, okay, this is a permanent state of being. But in actual fact, it's like, I am feeling angry. The brain goes, oh, it's a fleeting emotion. I know it's a feeling and feelings can change and then that's fine. So it's being conscious of your words. And actually, I'm going to share a story with you, which is words related. And this is kind of why I want to get into the writing. I had an incident with a guy that I was dating and he cheated on me. It was right at the beginning. We hadn't labeled anything. We weren't, officially exclusive or whatever. But I found out he was honest about it after I asked him. And, he kind of explained the situation to me. And I sat there and I cried and I drank wine because, that's how I roll. And then I was like, right, do you know what? I need to process this. I need to help myself process this in a way. I don't want to feel angry. This isn't an emotion that I am content with sitting with, and there's got to be a way of getting past this. And bizarrely in the back of my brain, and it's crazy, isn't it, how books that you read kind of come back in the forefront of your mind. So I'd read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I don't 100% agree with everything in that book, but actually one of the things in that book was like writing down and processing through each of the emotions. So I was like, all right, okay, let's try that. So I wrote down, I am angry because blah, 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 blah. I am frustrated because I asked you to tell me the truth and you didn't. I am upset because am I not enough for you? Like you have triggered me into having feelings, like looking internally my own feelings, going like, why am I feeling like this? You have made me feel like this, but in actual fact, he hasn't. I have made myself feel like that. But then I also kind of then got through those kind of darker emotions of like anger, frustration, sadness to kind of like be the ambivalence of, okay, so, in the grand scheme of things, nothing major has happened. I'm not dead. Nobody's died. Nobody's injured. It's only my feelings and my heart that's been hurt. wasn't even my heart that deep. And so then I started processing through, okay, so I wish you well. I wish you happiness. You know, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you made a wrong choice, but I understand the reason why you made that choice not to tell me was to protect yourself. So I can't be angry at you for that. And so then I was processing through, and then I literally got to the end where I was like, and I wish you and the girl involved well. I hope that if you are the right people for each other, you know, you have a wonderful life together. If you're not, I hope you find the right people who are for each of you. You know, like, and I was just like basically then putting love back out into the universe. And similar to what you were saying before, I read that through 2 or 3 times and I was sobbing every time I read it through, and I couldn't speak it out loud all the way through. I went to bed, I woke up the next morning and I read it almost without emotion. And I was like, oh, and then I was able to actually to see him and say to him, I don't think you're a bad person, and I forgive you for what you've done. And that was so healing. And so that's why I'm super into learning about the words and stuff like that. And I would love to, like, my brain, there's definitely stories going on in my brain because I'll catch myself in the middle of the night and it's almost like I am reading a book. Like, those are the words that are coming out, but I don't make sense of them because I'm half asleep. Or like you said, my body's so super relaxed. So there's definitely stuff inside me that wants to get out subconsciously. But I think I block myself sometimes.
Well, we do block ourselves, you know, and the mind is doing that to protect us because either we can't really fully process it at the time, or, you know, we know that it's going to be upsetting. But that, you know, it comes back to, you know, the meaning you give words, then the meaning you give your emotion, and the way you attach the words to the emotion. You know, you were able to process. It's like a lot of times, you know, when you're angry, if you were to dig deeper into angry, it's hurt.
Yeah.
And where does that hurt come from? You've been abandoned as a child, or you felt abandoned, or you felt ignored, you felt dismissed. So most emotions come back to emotional pain, you know, emotion, energy in motion. And if that's, it just keeps building and you reacting. So the way you process that with writing those things down and digging deeper, which leads to, you know, forgiveness, because forgiveness, we all struggle so much with forgiveness because we feel like we're letting the other person off the hook. But actually, forgiveness is what you did. It was understanding that you weren't angry. I mean, you felt angry, but you found out why, and you allowed him to be a fallible human being, as you're a fallible human being, and that's how forgiveness happens. You know, if you could think of somebody that, you know, makes you really angry, you've not forgiven. I had a friend who's got a very contentious relationship with her mother and her sister, for kind of good reason, you know.
Yeah.
It's difficult to know what's real and what's, you know, our own personal experience, because there's your truth, my truth, and his truth. And she was really struggling, you know, with keeping her patience with her mother. And I said, listen, try this. It might not work. It might. When you look at your mum and she's nagging or she's digging or she's ignoring you, try and look at her, rewind her clock to back when she was 5. If she's acting like a 5-year-old, chances are something happened at 5 that got stuck and she's never processed it. She's in pain. If you can look at your parent, sibling, whoever hurt you, if you can look at them as a wounded child, the ability to understand them and forgive them is huge. It takes so much burden off you, because then you can stop carrying that around. And during one of my writing sessions, one thing that popped up just now is I'd forgiven somebody for something they'd said when I was 11, 12, 13, that I'd carried with me my time, and I'd made it into my identity.
Wow.
But it was off the cuff mark from them. But to me, it was so painful that I identified with it quite quickly. And I believe that was me for the next 40 years. Wow. And I carried it around in my heart and made that who I was. And I realized that if I could forgive that person because they said that in total unconsciousness, they weren't aware, they didn't know why they said it. They might have been feeling a bit mean, but if they were feeling mean, they were hurting.
Yeah.
I was able to forgive her. And then, because I'd been the person who'd picked up that stone, let's say, put it in my heart where it weighed heavy, I realized that I needed to forgive myself for carrying it. And once I'd forgiven myself, my younger self, for picking it up and carrying it, the difference is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you
Amazing.
feel
Absolutely.
lighter.
Yeah, but it's life changing because I no longer see her as my enemy. I see her as a wounded child. We're all wounded children.
That's such a beautiful way of looking at it. We are all wounded children. Absolutely, we are. It doesn't matter how old you are, what nationality you are, who you are. We've all got wounds from our childhood. Like you said, some of them are unintentionally said or said in the heat of a moment, and it's forgotten by the person who said it, but it's picked up, the stone's picked up by yourself.
Yeah.
And then you've got to forgive yourself for kind of getting there. It's deep and it's hard, but I think anybody listening, these are really, really good points that you could just do to stop being the victim. Life doesn't happen at you or to you. You know, like you are in control. You are in control of, sometimes you don't feel like you are, but you're in control of what the words that you use, the feelings that you show. You're in control of how you react to a situation.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you can have the presence of mind to say, okay, this person's coming at me, but they're coming at me and they're acting like a child. So maybe they have an unhealed child, and like you said, they're a fallible human being. They're not perfect. And, you know, we're all imperfect. We're all perfectly imperfect, basically. But, you know, we all have imperfections as human beings. We've all said things. We've all done things. We've all shown up times and wished that we hadn't, you know, reflected back on it. And it's just letting go. I love this. This whole conversation has been amazing.
If you think about when you're at school, you know, when there was a school bully, you know, you were told, well, forgive them because something's happening at home. They need to exert that power. And if it's not dealt with in childhood, you carry it all the way through. And obviously, it doesn't stop at childhood. It gets compounded through teenage. I mean, can you imagine the amount of compounding that happens in teenage years when, especially that point where young people don't know if they're a kid or an adult. I mean, I remember being there and thinking, well, I'm grown up now, but I feel like a child. I'm still a child, but I feel like a grown up. And the confusion as well about your identity as a young person, you know, so yeah, there's a lot to unpack, as they say.
There is. Well, this is awesome. And I feel like I could talk to you forever, but I feel like we've kind of come to a natural conclusion with some absolute gold nuggets there. But first of all, tell all of the listeners how they can find you if they're interested in doing the wild writing sessions with you, or interested in the sister circles, or anything else that you do as well.
Yeah, okay. So as well as those two, I am about to start a course, April, called The Meaning of Meditation. Because when people say, well, why don't you meditate? Okay, what do I do? That's where the conversation ends. You know, we're not really taught. There are so many ways to do it and so many stages to a process. So I'll be teaching people, you know, how to work through stages of the different kinds of meditation and see what works for them. So my offerings are on Eventbrite. Letting the Light In is the name of me, basically. You've heard that quote. I mean, actually the quote that we see on the internet is incorrect. It's attributed to Ernest Hemingway, but it's actually Leonard Cohen. There was a bit taken from Hemingway and a bit taken from Cohen and put together as a standard. But it was Leonard Cohen said, "We are all cracked. That's how the light gets in."
Okay.
It's like, it makes me shiver. It's just magic words. So yes, I am letting the light in. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and my events are on Eventbrite. But my Facebook page, I tend to post, and Insta, I tend to post a bit more stories, you know.
Yeah. That's all right. That's fab. I'll include everything, all of the links in the show notes anyway. Okay, so before we go, I'm going to try. I love what you said about like, we've got to find the right therapist, the right hypnotherapist, the right coach, the right person for you. And I think the words that you use were, just because somebody is a therapist, it doesn't mean that they're your home. So you need to find your home if you're looking to basically do any of the deeper work, because you've got to trust somebody. So that's one. Everybody needs to go away and read, if you've not already, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Life-changing.
Just think about Yolanda's analogy of the stones. So you don't have to have a large trauma and pick up a rock. The same weight of the rock is like accumulated all of those tiny little traumas and pains throughout the years. And you are carrying that massive bag of stones that weighs the same as that giant rock. And so obviously there's some way of finding a way of putting those pebbles back in the ground, I guess. The power of the words. So I want you to go away today and this week and just catch yourself as to what you're saying word-wise, and just analyze it a little bit and go, oh, could I have said that in a better way? And stop yourself. So when you're saying I'm angry, stop yourself and go, no, I am feeling angry. So to see if you can do that this week, that's a good one to do. And we get to a place of forgiveness if we can look at whoever's coming at us and triggering us to see that they are a wounded child. So if they're acting like a child, there probably is a wounded child within them. And so if you can have the compassion to see past the words of hurt that you are hearing, and to understand that underneath there is a wounded child, then actually you'll be able to get to a place of forgiveness a lot faster. So I think they are your absolute gems. I'm sure there's more, Yolanda, but it has been amazing having you on this podcast. I'm so thankful, and I can't wait to come and do one of your wild writing sessions, because I am massively into, obviously, self-development and learning more, and I'm sure I've got some weird, crazy stuff in my head that needs to come out. So yeah, thank you ever so much, and hopefully people will be in touch with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And as always, any links or anything mentioned will be in the show notes. If you haven't connected with me already, I'd love to meet you. So come find me on Instagram at Debbie Westwell Coaching. You can always slide into my DMs and let me know what you thought about this episode. Or why not join my Facebook community, the Alchemy of Self-Care free community. You can also find out how to work with me at debbiewestwell.com. If you like what you hear, then please follow me or hit the bell icon. Share with somebody like you who would benefit from listening. And if you have time, then leave me a positive review, and that would be fabulous. Thank you for being your wonderful self, and I can't wait to chat next time.